The signal was weak, too weak for an emergency beacon. Red Caro frowned at the readings pulsing on his console. It wasn't coded like a distress call either. Just a rhythmic pulse, half buried in static, riding the edge of detectability like it wasn't meant to be found. He angled his patched-up ship toward the origin, curiosity pried loose from the cautious part of his mind. In the salvage lanes along the rim, sometimes curiosity paid off. Sometimes it killed people. Drifting near the upper atmosphere of a gas giant was the derelict, angular, massive, and unmistakably Corellian. The hull bore ritualistic etchings of their caste hierarchy, faded from plasma scoring. No power signatures. No active defenses. Red didn't like it. Corellians never left ships behind, not unless the cargo wasn't worth the retrieval, or it had been scrubbed of all usable assets. Docking was slow and silent. His boots clanked against their airlock, the noise too sharp in the dead quiet of an abandoned hull. Inside, the lights flickered erratically from backup capacitors barely holding charge. It smelled like ionized blood and burnt polymers. His suit filtered out the worst of it. He moved through passageways scorched in places and eerily untouched in others. There were no bodies. No signs of internal conflict. Storage compartments were emptied. Personal effects, data cores, fuel cells, all gone or stripped. It looked almost staged. Rhett's eyes narrowed. This wasn't a ship that had been destroyed. It was a ship that had been erased. Toward the aft, a sealed research bay lit up on his scanner, thick radiation shielding and atmospheric isolation. Curious. He ran diagnostics. The life support there still operated. One signature. Faint. Organic. He stared at the biometric readout. Weak vitals. Not Corellian. Wrong structure. Smaller. Spinal flexibility matched canine profiles, but with an irregular cranial node cluster. He powered up the external interface and began decrypting the Corellian security layers. They hadn't expected a human to come poking around. Within minutes, the seal gave a hiss and the chamber doors creaked open. Inside, white sterility reflected his flashlight in ghostly angles. Lab counters. Scattered tools. Scratched floor tiles. The stasis unit was cracked open but still humming at low energy. He stepped closer. It lay curled in the corner, frail, emaciated, skin pulled tight over bone. Pinkish-gray hide with faint albino fur clinging in irregular patches. For limbs, each tipped with dark claws dulled by growth inhibition. Head disproportionately large, with luminous eyes flickering in semi-conscious awareness. Its breathing was shallow, raspy. Red didn't move. This wasn't some lab-grown animal. It was a biological prototype, possibly engineered but wrong for simple utility. Too much brain volume. Too human a shiver in its posture. The thing didn't look dangerous. It looked discarded. He knelt beside it, careful. The creature tensed but didn't retreat. It was too weak. Rhett opened a compartment on his wrist module and injected a dose of stabilizer into the air. The creature flinched at the hiss, then stilled. He set down a thermal blanket and wrapped it slowly, hands deliberate. "You're not supposed to be here," he muttered. His voice was rough from disuse. It felt odd saying anything in a place like this. He swept the room's terminal for logs. Most were scrubbed. One corrupt file hinted at subject classifications. The creature was labeled Experimental Sublifeform 72KR, Cognitive Deficiency, Termination Authorized. A date. 2 days ago. They hadn't even bothered to kill it. Just left it to die when the recall order came. Not worth the power cost of one more injection. Red didn't bother asking himself if it was right to interfere. He'd never liked how Corellians treated anything beneath their caste lines, and this was just rot at the root. He scooped the creature up. It weighed nearly nothing. The thermal layer trembled in his grip, but it didn't resist. It was already shutting down when he made it back to his ship. Life support recalibrated. Atmospheric blend adjusted to match the reading. He laid it gently in the medbay's cradle and connected saline feeds, nutrient drips, and a neurosoothing interface adapted from an old drone rig. Halfway through, the creature stirred. It didn't open its eyes, but its mouth parted in a soundless whimper. Not a cry. Just presence. Something still tethered to existence. Rhett leaned against the console and watched the monitor settle into stable lines. No alarms. No flat lines. "You're lucky," he said quietly. "I'm human." He didn't say it as a boast. Just a fact. The med scans confirmed it within an hour. The creature wasn't just genetically modified, it had been built. Not born, not hatched, not evolved. Designed by the Corellians piece by piece, for a function. But the function wasn't listed. No classification beyond Sublifeform 72Kr. Everything else was redacted. Rhett dug through back-channel archives and xenogenetic databases. Eventually, he found a match in a forgotten treaty file. The species didn't have a name, just a reference line. Neuroadaptive biological tool, albino variant. Not a pet. Not a worker. A tool. According to the logs, they were bred for environmental recalibration in unstable systems. Disposable proxies for high-risk recalibration tasks, radiation-soaked atmospheres, corrosive depths, failed terraforming zones. Meant to die doing their job. Most didn't make it past 30 days. Rhett exhaled slowly. Scrap, the name settled into his mind uninvited, had lived well past the projected failure date. He adjusted the med settings for comfort over efficiency. The creature didn't respond to direct stimuli at first, but he noticed small changes. Muscle tension faded with warmth. Breath steadied with softer lighting. His voice seemed to register faintly. Not as language, but rhythm. He made a habit of speaking while he worked, patching a fuel valve, calibrating stabilizers, reprogramming the docking clamps. Scrap never moved from the medical cradle, but its ears twitched with each syllable. Rhett kept talking. About systems, old shipyards, the dust storms on Vesperine 5, why humans add flavor to nutrient paste. He wasn't sure if it mattered, but it filled the silence. Corellians didn't believe in silence. They believed in control. Eventually, Scrap tried to stand. Legs buckled. Rhett caught at midfall. The small frame trembled, not from pain, but from something deeper, trained submission. A learned stillness. Rhett didn't push it. He built a padded enclosure beside the engine chamber, surrounded by warmth and ambient hum. Scrap started resting there without prompting. That meant something. He ran a neural scan. Expected minimal brain activity. Got a surprise instead. Not only was there activity, it was complex. Neural clustering around auditory and visual centers was unusually dense. Pattern processing capabilities surpassed baseline levels for sentient classification. Scrap wasn't a tool. It was someone. The implications rolled over him. The Corellians had created something capable of awareness and dumped it like spare parts. Rhett remembered old Earth history, the way certain regimes treated their undesirables. This felt colder. At least in those times, they pretended their victims were threats. This wasn't even hate. It was indifference. The next day, he brought a small toolkit and let Scrap watch. Tools laid out, simple tasks, detaching a burnt relay, swapping out a cracked tube. Scrap watched every movement. The eyes followed not just the hands, but the flow, the logic. When Rhett accidentally dropped a spanner, Scrap flinched but didn't retreat. A few minutes later, a tiny paw nudged the tool toward him. No noise. No eye contact. Just a gesture. It kept happening. A wrench placed beside his elbow. A datapad nudged closer. Scrap wasn't mimicking, it was participating. Rhett modified an old harness to fit its narrow frame. A small padded rig with balance sensors. It allowed mobility without risk. At first, Scrap moved awkwardly, limbs unsure. But within hours, the motion refined. Weight shifted efficiently. The body had been built to adapt, it just needed a reason. By the end of the week, Scrap followed him during daily repairs. It never wandered. Never made noise. But its presence was constant. A silent shadow. Rhett stopped thinking of it as a passenger. It was crew now. He recorded the neural activity again. Showed exponential growth in pattern recognition, emotional memory formation, and anticipatory response. He encrypted the file and sent it to a contact on an independent bioethics committee. No message attached. Just data. Let them read the implications on their own. He noticed changes in himself too. The ship didn't feel as empty. Meals felt less mechanical. Even sleep came easier. When he ran a systems test, he saw a note in the log directory: an error tag had been relocated. The kind of adjustment a learning program would make, but no AI was authorized in that subsystem. He checked the internal cams. Saw Scrap near the console the day before, paw on the pad. That night, he sat across from it while it rested beside the reactor conduit. He didn't say anything profound. Just a thought. They called you a defect. Scrap blinked slowly. You're not broken. You were just made by monsters. He didn't expect a response. He got one anyway. A faint chuff of air. Barely a sound. But deliberate. Rhett nodded once, settled into his bunk, and let the reactor hum fill the room. Scrap adapted faster than any system Rhett had ever worked with. Not just in movement or routine, but in comprehension. Within 3 days, it had memorized the layout of the ship. By the 5th, it had learned how to toggle switches using the side of its muzzle. Rhett hadn't taught it. He'd simply observed. The creature absorbed detail like a sensor array, but acted with purpose. It wasn't mimicking for reward. It was learning because it wanted to. Rhett modified the navigation console's interface, integrating nonverbal input protocols, color-coded prompts, pattern sequences, motion triggers. Scrap understood them almost immediately. When he introduced a new calibration sequence, Scrap identified a misaligned diagnostic reading before the alert system flagged it. That wasn't animal instinct. That was recognition. Decision-making. Rhett updated his ship logs, quietly labeling Scrap as a Class 3 cognitive entity. No one else would see the classification, but it mattered to him. The difference between a tool and a person wasn't circuitry or organic mass, it was choice. Scrap was making choices. On the 8th day, Rhett was repairing a damaged thruster stabilizer. He dropped a high-density torque module under the panel. Before he could reach for it, Scrap retrieved it with gentle precision. Not only that, it placed the tool with the correct side facing up. Rhett froze. Scrap looked up once, then turned away. No demand for praise. No expectation. Just contribution. That night, Rhett drafted a neural interface schema. Not invasive, he refused to touch the cerebral core. Instead, he designed a passive amplifier that could sit near the outer neural lattice, converting intent pulses into audio chimes. A language bridge of sorts. He installed it while Scrap rested. The calibration was slow, the harmonics unpredictable, but on activation, the first tone rang clear and warm. Scrap twitched an ear, then a chime echoed back, short, sharp, intentional. The first exchange was simple. Rhett tapped a panel. Scrap chimed once. Then twice. Then held silence. It was response, rhythm, acknowledgement. Not speech, but dialogue. The ship's routines changed. Rhett began trusting Scrap with small tasks, monitoring temperature shifts, logging cargo integrity, adjusting power levels during maneuvering sequences. Every time, the job was completed, logged, and confirmed. Rhett stopped double-checking after a while. There was no need. Then came the proximity alert. A Corellian scout vessel passed through the sector. Rhett's transponder was masked, his registry flagged as civilian maintenance. Still, he knew how their scans worked, especially the biometric pings. He shut down all active signatures, powered the drive core into latent mode, and engaged the null field dampeners. Scrap lay still during the lockdown. Not a twitch, not a sound. It understood something was wrong. The scout didn't stop, but it lingered. Too long. Rhett monitored its passive sweep pattern. They weren't looking for scrap metal. They were searching for something biological. He waited 2 hours after the ship cleared sensor range before breathing fully again. Then he looked at Scrap, who hadn't moved from the heat duct. No fear. Just alert focus. It knew it wasn't supposed to exist. Rhett opened his supply locker. Inside were 3 stacked crates of salvaged equipment, enough to fund 2 months of operation. He took one, moved it to the airlock, and jettisoned it. No hesitation. Less cargo meant a lower heat profile, and he wasn't risking detection. Scrap watched but didn't react. When the outer door sealed, Scrap padded over, pressed its nose to Rhett's arm, then stepped away. A silent nod, translated through motion. Later that day, the ship's AI flagged a system warning, coolant leak near the fusion junction. Rhett ran a preliminary fix, but the feed pipe showed signs of deep structural fatigue. It needed internal resealing. The crawl space was too narrow for him with his suit on. He hesitated. Looked at the diagnostics. Then at Scrap. Scrap approached, lay down beside the tool bag, and waited. Rhett said nothing. Just handed over a miniature emitter rig, pointed once at the diagram, and opened the access hatch. Minutes passed. Rhett stared at the feed, tension grinding in his jaw. Then, stabilization. No burst. No spike. Pressure normal. Scrap emerged soot-covered, one leg limping from the thermal stress but alert. Rhett grabbed it before it collapsed. No sound from Scrap. No complaint. Just a brief, satisfied exhale before it shut its eyes. Rhett sat there on the floor, holding something that wasn't supposed to survive, wasn't supposed to think, wasn't supposed to feel. But it had done all 3. Better than most people he knew. "You saved us both, you little idiot," he muttered. Scrap didn't reply. It didn't need to. The repairs were complete. System stabilized. Fuel levels optimal. Rhett plotted a course beyond charted space, uncharted debris corridors, high radiation fields, places Corellians avoided for efficiency reasons. It was time to disappear. Scrap had proven more than an anomaly. It was a liability to the wrong eyes. A secret like this didn't stay hidden forever. Rhett had seen what the Corellian Order did when they reclaimed what they deemed unfinished. He transmitted a silent ping to a smuggler relay buried in a dead moon's crust. Hours later, a response came, 1 jump point, limited time access, no questions asked. The kind of favor you burn once. Rhett marked the coordinates. No celebration. No pause. Just action. Scrap spent longer at the main terminal now, eyes moving across the motion-responsive overlays. It began initiating minor course corrections before the auto-NAV could react. Rhett adjusted the protocols accordingly, letting it take partial navigational control during safe intervals. The AI adapted to the patterns but couldn't mimic the timing. Scrap wasn't just reacting, it was anticipating gravitational drift, plotting compensation curves on instinct. Born from a lab, yet it moved like it belonged out here. The further they traveled, the more Scrap's behavior evolved. It started vocalizing, not words, but structured chimes through the interface Rhett had built. Each tone bore distinct cadence, consistent in context. Over time, it developed into a system. Low 3-tone bursts for alert status. Sharp doubles for objection. A rising sequence when initiating tasks. Rhett didn't correct or guide it. He just listened. One evening cycle, Scrap signaled a harmonic tone Rhett hadn't heard before, slow, descending, resonant. The creature pointed to a damaged memory drive Rhett had kept in storage. The drive was corrupted, unreadable by standard systems. Scrap placed a paw on it and emitted the tone again. Rhett connected it to the AUX reader. Data flickered, unindexed, fragmented, but alive. Scrap wasn't just responding to stimulus. It was identifying information signatures through resonance. It had built a sensory model beyond mechanical interfaces. That realization struck hard. This wasn't replication. It wasn't learned mimicry. Scrap was evolving past its engineered parameters. Beyond survival. It was innovating. Rhett ran a deeper scan of its neural core. He found dense restructuring, connections forming in patterns parallel to independent cognition species. Synaptic bridges where none had existed a week before. It was outpacing natural brain development by a factor of 7. Left alone, it could surpass baseline sapience within days. And then the message arrived. An encrypted ping through an old relay chain. One of Rhett's emergency networks. A brief, unmarked file. Coordinates. Corellian salvage crews reported Rhett's ship's signature near the derelict weeks ago. They were tracking it. Quietly. Patiently. The ping came with a timestamp. Less than 18 hours old. He rerouted systems into silent mode again. Dropped power draw. Minimized emissions. They couldn't outrun Corellians in a straight line, but they could vanish into the storm fields ahead. A place with no visibility, ion storms that disrupted every scanner model Rhett had ever seen. Most ships avoided it. He set course straight into it. Scrap didn't react with fear. It steadied itself near the reactor panel, eyes locked on the flickering star map. It knew. It understood the weight of being hunted. The moment they hit the outer turbulence, power surged erratically. Rhett kept manual control, hands steady, eyes scanning for burnouts. Scrap leaned into the interface, initiating internal system redirection. It rerouted auxiliary power before the backup could trip, preserving their stealth profile. Rhett didn't speak. Just let it work. The turbulence worsened. Interference patterns chewed through navigation. Visual range reduced to static haze. Then 2 blips. Corellian scout drones. Advancing on intercept vectors. No weapons fired. Yet. Scrap emitted 2 tones, sharp, insistent. Then overrode the auxiliary NAV lock. Rhett was about to intervene when he saw the pattern. It was baiting a pulse echo. A decoy signal. Scrap had mimicked their own ship's EM signature and displaced it through a booster loop 10 kilometers off their trajectory. The drones split, one following the echo, the other hesitating. Not fooled. Rhett diverted engine output to one side, used gravitational drift to mask movement. Scrap tapped the console. Rhett nodded once. He initiated the burn. They slipped under the drone's blind arc, past the swirling field of debris, and through a volatile ion pocket. Sparks lit across the hull, but the ship held. Behind them, silence. No pursuit. Rhett shut down the burn and let the ship coast on momentum. He turned toward Scrap, breathing shallow. You think like a tactician now. Scrap tilted its head once. Then emitted a low, rising hum. Not a warning. Not confirmation. Challenge accepted. The storm field behind them collapsed into silence. No contacts on long-range scan. Rhett adjusted the dampeners manually, keeping the ship just beneath detectable thresholds. Every system ran lean, stripped to core function. Scrap remained beside the primary console, eyes closed, breathing steady, but awake. It had not rested properly in over 2 cycles. Neither had Rhett. They couldn't yet. He initiated a long-range burst transmission, coded, randomized, broadcast into dead space. A beacon wrapped in nothing. Not a call for rescue. A proof of life. Some allies owed favors. Most wouldn't respond. Still, he had to try. Scrap resumed activity without prompt. It ran diagnostics through the rear stabilizers, adjusting power flow to reduce resonance signature. Rhett watched without interrupting. Everything was done with intention, silent, precise, without instruction. There was no question of ability anymore. Scrap was capable of independent command. Then the reactor gave a brief pulse warning. Not failure. A synchronization issue in the core loop. One misalignment could create a cascade under stress. The Corellians weren't chasing, but Rhett didn't trust coincidence. He cut power to secondary systems and accessed the core manually. Scrap arrived seconds later, already scanning thermal output logs. It pointed once at a pressure valve cluster, heat differential too narrow. Rhett followed its logic. It was right. Again. The reactor had destabilized from uneven coolant distribution, caused by the manual redirection during the last maneuver. Together, they adjusted the flow balance, recalibrated the heat sinks, and reset the energy matrix. When the final sequence confirmed stability, Rhett finally let himself exhale. They floated for hours in dead space. The silence wasn't empty. It was earned. A single return ping arrived, coded, fragmented, untraceable. Rhett decrypted it. The message was brief. Signal confirmed. Safe channel pending. Hold position 3 cycles. Unknowns inbound. No signature. No location. No guarantee. But someone had heard them. Scrap curled beside the access ramp, eyes half closed, still connected to the auxiliary sensor node. Rhett saw the slow modulation of its breathing. Not exhaustion, focus. Even in rest, it remained alert. He pulled the logs from the last 6 days. Scrap had initiated over 70 discrete ship operations, from internal reconfigurations to passive navigation shifts. All logged. All correct. Most not even attempted by seasoned crew. He updated the ship registry manually. Designation, Mechanics Mate. Crew 2, status active. Scrap blinked once when he keyed it in. No reaction beyond that. But something subtle passed between them. Understanding. Recognition. 3 cycles passed in relative quiet. Then the inbound signal changed. A ship emerged, not Corellian. Civilian frame, heat mast, armed only with basic turrets. A Free State vessel. No transponder. Ghost class. The kind of ship that didn't record names. They hailed once, audio only. We have room. We won't ask why. You get one ride. After that, you're on your own. Rhett looked to Scrap. It was already at the NAV console, routing the docking procedure. No hesitation. No fear. Transfer completed in minutes. Supplies were loaded. Data backup secure. Rhett handed over the encrypted files detailing Scrap's origin, evolution, and current neural schema. He gave no speech, no explanation. Just handed the drive over. The receiving officer didn't ask. He simply took it and walked away. Rhett didn't board the ghost ship. He remained in his own. Scrap did the same. They weren't hiding anymore. They were moving forward. He rerouted navigation into the deep rim systems, uncharted sectors, long abandoned. There were rumors of old war AI, forgotten science stations, and broken planets that once held libraries bigger than any core world archive. Places where something like Scrap wouldn't be seen as failure, but possibility. The ship responded well to the new heading. No turbulence. No stress. Scrap initiated a harmonic sequence through the neural bridge. A low-pitched rising tone followed by a sharp click. Rhett had heard it once before, during reactor stabilization. This time, it followed no problem. It was a question. He responded with 3 tones through the console: confirmation, agreement, forward path. Scrap answered with 2 chimes. Then silence. For the first time since this began, there was no pursuit behind them. No scan signatures. No system flags. Just stars ahead, and work to do. Rhett leaned back, eyes on the drift. Let's build something better. Scrap didn't reply in sound. It simply remained beside him, steady and still. Crew of 2. Neither born for the world that left them behind. Both making a new one, together.